Let's turn two chords into a beautiful vintage sample. Savage, Kendrick Lamar, Brent Faiyaz, Drake, the list goes on. All of these artists have used and still use, well, their producers use vintage samples, whether that be original vintage samples or modern vintage samples, which I'm going to show you how to do today. And they're really fun to make, and it's a really good tool to have in your arsenal as a producer. I'm going to show you how you can take two chords and turn them into an incredible vintage sample. So without further ado, let's jump into the theory breakdown. We're in the key of E minor, and we are just thinking of a 4/5 progression, which is just A minor to a B minor, or if you're thinking about this scale in its relative major scale, which is G major, then we're just playing a 2/3. Our first chord being an A minor chord. We just build a simple triad here with an A, a C, and an E. We have one more note, the minor 7th, which you can find by just moving two notes away from our root up here. We have a G. From that minor 7th, we could just add one more note again, which is going to be taking our root note and moving a tone away. So that's going to be a B. We add a B on top, we get a minor 9 chord, which is a really beautiful chord used in R&B and soul music all the time. To just make our second chord, take our root note, move it up a semitone to A flat, and then another semitone, and our root is now on B, and we build exactly the same intervals. We're just going to add again a nice C sharp on the top, and we can mute out any of these notes, or we can move them around to create inversions. For example, if we move this note here down and this 9th down as well, we get a really interesting kind of close voiced minor 9 chord, which can sound really good for like neo soul stuff and like Victoria Armani type samples where you want to get really like soulful with it. But if you spread the voices out, you can just use different instruments and make melodies with any of these notes. I mean, you could just use like the E minor scale on top of these chords and create simple melodies. These are the two building blocks for the whole sample. So if we go into the DAW, you can see how I arpeggiated these chords and used them to kind of build something really incredible. Guys, if you're not following me on Instagram, do it now. The handle is right here. Go cop some of my free mini kits. The link is in the description. If you haven't done that already, go check out my little website, and there's some paid products there if you want to support as well. I would most appreciate it. Now, let's forget this bit and go straight back to the breakdown. So here's the session, and as you can see, I've kept myself to around 10 or 11 sounds. I always kind of play by that Coop the Truth rule, where I've analysed a load of his samples, the stems, and there's only ever really like 10 or 11 or 12 at the most sounds. And also I built this one up, so the first 8 bars more setting the scene, and then bars 9 to 17 I really like let all the sounds come out, like almost like a chorus section. I didn't change the sections up, but I just wanted to demonstrate arrangement and the power of just bringing sounds in gradually to really build that emotion. So I've muted the sound shifter, which is taking the whole sample up by a semitone, so we are back in E minor now. I love harps in R&B, and I remember like The Boy Is Mine. I wanted to do something like that, maybe like a homage to that with this sample here. So I reached for this Irish harp, which is part of the free sounds in Contact Player, and so you can go grab this totally free, guys. Program this Christmas tree looking thing. I know it's not Christmas anymore, but all this is an arpeggio, and I've kept different note lengths to give a bit more natural feel. So you just have a bit of velocity variation, which again adds to that kind of real playing, because if you're making vintage sort of samples, you want them to feel like a real musician has played it. And all I've done is every first beat here, I've just put a bass bass note in to emphasize. So if I solo this sound and we have a little listen. Almost sounds like, it's quite hypnotic. It almost sounds like a piano, but not quite got the same quality as a piano. So I've done 4 bars worth of each chord. Lets that chord sort of get into your ear and sets that harmonic kind of tone that you can build around. Processing wise on this sound, went for my old favorite RC20, some EQ, just rolled off some bottom and a little bit of vintage verb. Doing quite a lot of wobble in there. Almost wanted it to sound like it was coming off an old record. The next sound that I laid in was just a piano, and you'll see here that arrangement wise, although I played all my sounds from the very beginning, I've muted out a lot of them. You can see it properly here, just to keep the opening of the sample really empty, and then the more that we go along, more stuff comes in. And as you can see here as well, put a little feel, again, shout out to London Rain. Introducing instruments before they come in fully gives more realism, and again makes it sound less loopy and more like an actual record. We'll come back to the piano when that comes in, but the next sound that I actually wanted in this intro part, which only comes in on this intro part, is a low piano. And again, I was just emphasizing giving weight to those bass notes. I just used Logic's stock vintage upright, and these new studio pianos in Logic, they do sound really good, and I use them a lot now. I'm lazy. The first plugin that I can normally reach for, I just will go and grab it. RC20 again, I use a lot of the same settings in these vintage samples because these would have been recorded probably in one room, sometimes just with like a couple of room mics. So I want to keep that continuity in sounds here. That's a good tip to remember. So again, if I just play you these 2 sounds, and these are the only 2 sounds that come in the first couple of bars of the sample. I'm playing octaves in the bass, and it's just setting off that rhythmic and also harmonic soundscape that we're in here. A good trick to do if you're going to use octaves like this is make the velocity of the lowest note a little bit less than the ones above it. Otherwise, you can get a bit muddy. And also, I've rolled a lot of bottom off of here. I didn't want these to sound like boom, really like shaking the room. I just wanted them to just add a little bit more weight to the harp. If we move through this timing wise, you'll see what I did here. I know I said this was 2 chords, but there's like a couple of other chords coming in here, but literally just a couple passing chords, or in fact just one passing chord, which is the A sharp minor 7th, and I'm just using that as a tension chord that brings me into this B minor 7 chord. And you can hear that I introduced the piano here at bar, like kind of halfway through bar 4, and I also introduced our bass guitar. So again, check this out. I'm anticipating bar 5 by just bringing in these 2 sounds. Our bass, which is going to come in fully at bar 5, and also our piano. Right, obviously we've got the bass piano here, but I'm just, the first time we're actually hearing chords on the piano. And what does happen at bar 5 is our main piano comes in. I'm just using that same sound that I was using for the bass piano. Yeah, these are just root position chords, but you can see I've given them a bit of a human feel by just strumming the chords out and even moving one of the notes slightly before the bar line. And I've just added this one little grace note or passing note here. If I solo the piano for you, and there's that little walk down, ba 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 ba, and it's a transitional walk down. I love little phrases like that, and when I have all the different instruments playing either those notes, it gives a really nice rhythmic and also like signature melody to part of the sample. You can see if I solo the bass here as well and show you the MIDI that I use, we're walking down. Bass line wise, this is a trick I use all the time. For a passing note for the bass, I'm approaching it a 5th away, so bum bum, so We've also got towards the end of this little phrase with that walk down, I brought in another one of my sounds. Now, vintage samples, I feel like I always have to put a Glockenspiel or a Celeste, something that's like hit percussion. I know Al Hug loves playing like real xylophones and Glockenspiels and his samples, so these ones are perfectly usable. Again, I've gone for the same processing. Processing's really simple. You'll see with me, like, I'm using pan in here, try and use as least processing as I possibly can to make things sound good with the information that I use instead of the processing necessarily. Drum wise, I've gone for this like in addictive drums and Neue Schlagzeug, which just means new drums in German. I just thought this matched my arpeggiated sound so well. It's hitting that tom all the time throughout the whole groove, and that nice movement to the groove. There's some vinyl crackle going on here as well. I'll just bring that in. And so yeah, you've got the drums and the harps going, and then like this little unison line. Unison just means playing at the same time. Nice little fill here on the drums where I'm just kind of again anticipating my full drop. For this drop section, I brought in a few more sounds. A string sound where I'm just playing just padded versions of the chords. And the thing with strings I like is to keep the voices quite close to each other. I did the same with the choir. I love these Hollywood backup singers together now. A lot of lush soul arrangements. I think Charles Stepney is his name. He did tons of like beautiful string and choir arrangements in the 70s for like so many records. Playing the chords there and adding a couple notes on top. I just hear these things in my head. So again, it's just about listening to a lot of these old records and just taking inspiration from them. Piano wise, I kept it the same. I brought in like some lead vocals, just some chops from Arcade, the processed in the same way again. I'm playing little triads here on the Glockenspiel. And I'm just using that as I call like sprinkles, ear candy on the top. Again, look at my pan in here. Every sound, they're all simple, but they're adding a little bit. Nothing's doing too much heavy lifting, but like everything together makes a beautiful picture. Simple but effective. And if you employ those same kind of tactics, you're going to make some beautiful samples. I'd love to hear them. Make sure you hit me up on Insta and check out the video in the top corner now for more source.